Hey, everybody, this is Brett Ingram. This is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Terry Whalin, editor and author of more than 60 books, and he's written for more than 50 magazines. I'm super excited because so many people want to write their own book, but literally have no idea how to do it, or even worse, have mistaken ideas about how it all works. So, with that, welcome, Terry, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Brett, wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm excited. Anytime I have an opportunity to talk to somebody, I think writing is such an important skill, as is editing, by the way. And I think it's in some ways in today's day and age can be a lost art, right? Because I mean, my wife is a literature teacher, so she grew up loving this stuff the whole time. I mean, I admittedly have never been a great reader, but I've always understood the value of it and how important it is. And I'll tell you one really fascinating story from the very beginning. When I was in college, one of the books that I was tasked to read was a book called On Writing Well by William Zinsser. And it always fascinated me because one of the chapters in there, I thought it was really well written and fascinating for a book about writing. I'm like, this is boring, but it's fascinating. So I'm reading it, and you get to the middle of the book, and he talks about the importance of an editor, and he says, you know what? I'm gonna prove this to you. Here's my original chapter. Here's the edited chapter, and I was blown away by the difference with all the things that were changed. And I mean, the original one was pretty good, and then you saw the edited version. You're like, wow. So that's what a good editor does. So anyway, I have a ton of questions I want to ask you, but can we
No,
start off with your personal?
I really think, Brett, you're actually right. The team approach is one of the best ways that anybody can really get their book out there. And on William Zinsser, the funny thing is that I actually met William Zinsser years ago. He
Really?
came and spoke to the Evangelical Press Association that I was at, and we all got copies of On Writing Well. I mean, I lined up just like everybody else, and I have a signed copy of On Writing Well up here on my shelf right above me.
That is amazing. Yeah, I'll tell you, you know when you read a book decades ago and you still remember it like it was yesterday, that it was a good book. And
Absolutely.
that really opened my eyes. It was the first time I really saw the power of what editing looked like because he didn't tell you it was the unedited version of the chapter. You read the chapter and you were like, oh, this, then you go to the next and they're like, this is what it looks like when it's done. And then, oh, wow. I mean, I was blown away. So let's talk about your personal story a little bit. How did you
Sure.
start your career and what led you to writing and publishing?
Yeah, I was actually, it was in high school that my high school English teacher, um, I don't know what he did, but he noticed something David Smith noticed something in my writing and encouraged me to join the high school newspaper. So that's what I did. I ultimately became the editor of my high school newspaper in Peru, Indiana, is where I went to high school. And it got me interested in the whole writing realm. And I thought I was a pretty good writer, to be honest, back then, Brett. And so I went to Indiana University, one of the top 10 journalism schools in the country, 30,000 students on the main campus. I joined the college newspaper and started writing stories. And back then, we blew off our classes. We were writing stories. That's what we were doing back then. And I joined a social fraternity. I really thought that's what I was going to do with my life. I was going to be a newspaper reporter at the Indianapolis Star, the Chicago Tribune, one of those kind of places. But about halfway through my sophomore year, I'd been out drinking the night before. I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys. And I kept muttering to myself, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde haired girl that was sitting next to me turned to me and she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that, because one of these days when you really need Jesus, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what is this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. I I had no idea what it was to be a Christian, Brett. And she encouraged me to go to a little bookstore a couple blocks off the Indiana campus there. They had pretty cards and posters. Maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a few days later. I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And so I read that book. It showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. But about that time, somebody invited me to this Jesus people gathering in downtown Bloomington, and people were sitting on little scraps of carpets with little candles lit. And those people had something that I didn't have. And so I got a Bible, and I've been going the Jesus trail with the direction of my life ever since. Um, I actually turned from my writing back then, and I went into linguistics. My journalism colleagues thought I was a little crazy because instead of becoming that newspaper reporter, I ultimately joined a group called Wycliffe Bible Translators. I spent 17 years with those guys. I worked in Guatemala, Central America, among the Southwest Cachiquel people. I actually have a New Testament here on my shelf too that I did among the Southwest Cachiquel people from that experience. And then I kind of wandered back to my writing, and I ultimately became the editorial director at Wycliffe. I was in charge of the mission and all of our print things, books, our publication, in other words, that kind of thing. I started writing for magazines, and I always encourage writers to go to a writers conference because often who you know in this business is almost as important as what you know. So no matter where you are in the whole writing journey, get to some event because that is really a great experience for you. You can learn a lot, and it'll move your whole journey along in that process. So I was writing for magazines back then, different kinds of magazines. I'm still writing for magazines. And I was out walking with an editor, and she said, Terry, I've got a problem. And I'm like, well, I always listen when these editors tell me that. And she said, I'm at David C. Cook, and we are charged to challenge our kids and encourage them that the world's a big place and they should go to that world. We don't have a single book in our whole children's line that talks about that. What kind of ideas do you have, Terry? And so my kids were little at that time. I was reading a lot of kids' books to them. And I knew that Stephen Lawhead, who's a fantasy writer, also had a set of kids' books that he was doing called called Howard Had. He used it he wrote it under his name, Steve Lawhead. And so he had Howard Had a Spaceship, Howard Had a Hot Air Balloon, that kind of thing. Those books combined a real picture with a cartoon character to stir kids' imagination. And I thought, hey, what if we did that for going to the world? Because at Wycliffe, we had all these real pictures from around the world. So I said, what if we combined real pictures with a little cartoon character to show kids they could go anywhere? And she said, oh, that's a good idea, Terry. Write that up and send that to me. So I made a little note. I went home and wrote it up, and we went back and forth a bunch. But that ultimately became my first book that's out there called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus. It came out in 1992. And that's kind of the thing that launched me into the whole book area. But basically, Brett, I tell those stories because at the end of the day, I'm in the book business because books change people's lives. And I know that firsthand because, I read that book, Jesus the Revolutionary. It changed my life. And that's why I do what I do.
That's amazing, and I'm always fascinated by, everybody has a story and a journey, and there are always some things that are unexpected along the way that you might not, that they seem to be serendipitous events that happen. And at the time, you may or may not recognize the power or value of it. But sometimes when you look back later on your life, um, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he's sort of gone through this very interesting but very diverse background in terms of his professional trajectory. But the crazy thing about it is that when you look at what he's doing right now, it is kind of the culmination. There are pieces of all the other things he's done along the way that's made him successful at what he's doing right now. And I think that journey is so common for all of us. In my own experience, there have been things that I've done professionally and personally in my life that I didn't at the time recognize the importance or value or what it was going to do for me later. And
That's
then when I
right.
look back at doing things later, I'm like, wow, yeah, wait, I know where that comes from. That's from, so I think that's really fascinating. And it's amazing that you are able to pinpoint such a specific thing. So you've written a lot at this point in your career, books, magazines, blogs, just about everything else. Is that the favorite thing that you've ever worked on, your first book, or is there another project that stands out to you, or something else that you take a lot of pride in that you've done?
Oh, every book is different, and it really is the journey that we're all on. There's no real formula out there that anybody's found about how to make a bestseller. You just need to sit down and be writing it. But yeah, I have a lot of pride in a lot of different books that I've written. It's be almost like trying to ask me which of my children is
Yeah.
my favorite children. I don't really have a favorite. I love them all equally. Uh, Books are hard though. People, the writing journey is difficult for all of us. I mean, I just finished a book in mid December that I did, and throughout the process, I'm telling my wife, this is really hard, you know, and but I still, you know, went to my computer every day, wrote the words that I needed to do to be able to finish the deadline, and that's a journey that all of us are on to do and persevere and persist in this effort, because it's it's not easy or simple for any of us. But I do have a lot of pride in the different stories and people that I've worked with over the years. I've had just these amazing experiences.
Yeah, which is great. I just did. I mean, sometimes there's one thing that will really stick out, but obviously you're going to take pride in all the work that you do. So I'm curious as to your take on this. I've heard writers say, look, every day if you're trying to write a book or trying to write something, even if you're not feeling the creativity that day, sit down, write, keep getting into the process over and over. I've also heard people say, wait until you got that sort of stroke of genius, you're in that zone, and it just starts to flow out of you, and right then. Do you have a take or a stance on that? I'm really curious.
uh, I don't have a. Yeah, I guess my take is that no matter where I am, if I have 10 minutes, uh, I will turn and write something, and then I go on to something else. So it's not like I need a huge block of time or anything. Um, I've actually got, whenever I travel, I've got this thing called an Alpha Smart. It's old technology. It's a full size keyboard. Kids used to use it. It only has 4 lines of type that it shows. It's not connected to the internet. So I use that, when I travel somewhere. And it holds 150 pages of text. I have friends that sit out on their decks and write novels and things like that. You can use it anywhere. I've used it on airplanes and all kinds of places. So, you know, there's techniques like that. So just find whatever works for you and do that over and over. I guess is what I'd recommend. And Brett, I want to return to one book I'd like to tell you about that I am really
Sure.
proud of. Is As an acquisitions editor, I started working for a publishing house. I'm actually working for my third publisher as an acquisitions editor, finding the books that we publish. And but the first time I did it, it was very eye opening to me, because I would sit in these rooms full of executives, the leaders of our company, and they were trying to decide which books to publish. And often I didn't have the material from the author that I really needed in order to be able to get them a book contract. So out of my own frustration, I wrote this book called Book Proposals That Sell: 21 Secrets to Speed Your Success. And that book has gotten out there. It's got over 155-star reviews. It's helped people get an agent, find a book deal, get an advance. All kinds of great things have happened from it. But publishing's changed a lot through the years. And so a couple of years ago, I went back and completely revised that book and published the revised edition. And people can get that revised edition from me if they go to bookproposals.ws. And it shows the cover and a big button that says free book. And you can get the whole book from me if you just go over there. I give that away because one of the things we've learned at Morgan James is that if you get that ebook from me and you start to read that ebook, there is a high probability you're going to turn and buy the print copy of the book. So giving away that ebook, I lose nothing. I actually drive print book sales in that process. But that book proposal is a very important document for anybody that wants to publish a book, because that's essentially your business plan. You lay out, what you're going to do. Who's the reader? Who's the competition for your book? What are you going to do? It's a hard document to write. I freely admit that. And I've written 2 of them that got 6-figure advances. Now, I've got long stories about what happened to those books and why those particular books didn't succeed in the market. But that book proposal is a very important document for any writer to work on, whether they're writing fiction or a children's book or a nonfiction book, whatever they plan to write.
I mean, I guess on some level, right? Even if we're creators, we still have to be salespeople to some extent, because you got to get people to pay attention. And we live in an age now where we're bombarded with stuff all the time. There's messaging everywhere, and so you've got to do something that stands out. You've got to find a way. I mean, I remember hearing people talk about stories about trying to pitch a movie script. You could have spent years writing this script. And if you are lucky enough to get in front of an executive at a movie, production company, you've got what, 90 seconds? You've got to be able to give them enough of a hook that they want to hear more, or you're done and they're on to the next one. So a couple of years worth of work, if you can't encapsulate in a pitch that's so compact and tight and hooks people, your thing may never see the light of day. So I believe that that's a super important document and a super important thing for people to have. So as a writer, let's talk about attributes a little bit. Is there a particular attribute or set of attributes you think are most important for someone to become a successful author?
In terms of attributes, I think the one of the main things is to learn to tell a good story at the end of the day. There's facts and there's all kinds of stuff in books, but the things that we remember are the stories at the end of the day. And a lot of people want to write books. Hey, I totally get that. Books are permanent, all that kind of thing. But the reality in the book business is if you sell 5,000 copies of your book in the lifetime of the book, that's a good number. Where in the magazine business, it's very easy to reach 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people with your work. Magazine articles are shorter, and so you learn how to write for a particular reader, how to write a good headline, how to have a beginning, a middle, and end, that kind of thing. And I always encourage people to write for magazines. People don't even think about that often, but start to tell those stories, because all of us have these personal experience stories, and those personal experience articles are something that almost every publication takes. So part of the way you learn to write for publications is these editors will put out what they want. They call it their guidelines. You can find them online, or you can write and ask for them, or look at a market guide or something like that. If you give that editor what he's looking for, you're more likely to actually have success. And that, I mean, it's logical, but hardly anybody thinks thinks about that. They say, "Oh, this is what I want to write." Well, at the end of the day, who cares what you want to write? In some ways, what does the editor want, and what does the reader want out there? Those are some of the attributes that you have to think about. And as far as sales go, none of us want to be in sales. We don't really want to do that. But if you stress the benefits of what somebody's going to get from reading your book, that's the information that every reader needs. And that's not really a sales thing. You're just trying to help people, in that process. So if you do that kind of thing with your book, you're gonna find your readers out there and find your audience. But those are some of the attributes that I think are really important for all of us to find at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that makes a lot of sense, and I've actually seen the same an interesting parallel in the online world with social media. I've talked to some people that are social media experts, and they said the biggest problem that people have that try to build a following online is that the content they're creating is for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's like you said, it's like nobody cares what you want. You have to give something the audience wants, otherwise, there's no audience. So, maybe if you get to a level of celebrity, people care just because they're fascinated by you. But if you aren't somebody that already has a reputation and a following, and you're trying to create something, it has to have value for the audience, whether you're writing a book or whether you're posting on social media, or nobody's going to care. And I think that that in and of itself is it's so simple, but it's really powerful and profound, because I do think so many people come from things from their own perspective that they fit. And by the way, I see this in business all the time. I coach a lot of business owners. I've been an entrepreneur for 17 years. And one of the things that I think it was Jay Abraham, the marketing legend, who said, people fall in love with their product, they should fall in love with their customer. Because the minute that you start focusing on what benefit am I providing, and is this something that's going to change people's lives, you've now unlocked the key to whatever you want to be able to sell and market, whatever, because at that point you're solving a problem for people. If you get in love with something and the features and all the bells and whistles of your own thing for the sake of building it, that you're just going to be lucky if it happens to work out, because you're not focused on who you're actually creating it for. So,
Yeah, no,
um,
that's exactly right, Brett. I mean, people forget that we're all selfish, as individuals, and we approach a book saying, "What's in it for me?" That's why we read it. That's why we turn the pages. And so, as the writer of the book, you really need to have that reader clearly in mind, and make sure you're telling interesting stories, and that, back to that editor again, that you have a really great product that you're going to put out there, so that they remember it years down the road, like you did with William Zinsser there. So
yeah, absolutely. So, as an editor, I'm actually curious about this too. You've edited a lot of other people's work. What are the biggest mistakes that you see writers make that are actually writing? So they've actually put something together. They put, pen to paper, but they've created something. Are there big mistakes that you see, or common themes that you see that writers make?
yeah, there's a lot of things. The hardest thing for anybody to see in their own work is something that's not there. And so that's the hardest thing. That's why I wrote book proposals that sell with a checklist and different things, because you have to have all those elements at the end of the day. So if you send me something, for example, at Morgan James, we acknowledge every submission. It's almost old school here, but we acknowledge every submission with a letter in the U.S. mail. So
Huh?
we need your mailing address when you send me something. People don't send that to me. And so I have to ask for it. We have to have a real address that's complete and makes sense and all that kind of thing. So there's just basic elements like that that sometimes people forget, but it's very important, because at the end of the day, as an editor, if I'm going to send you a book contract, I need to have your address. So don't hide that from me. Just give me that information. So yeah, there's a lot of details in the publishing business, and you have to have all those details sort of in place in order to be able to get moving forward to get a book contract.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. And it's no surprise. Like with any industry, once you get on the inside, you see how everything works and you see things. I was in staffing for years, and I know when someone is looking for a job, it feels like this black box of mysteriousness. When you're on the other side of it, you realize it's literally just a process and a numbers game. And once you've done that, right, it's no different than dating or trying to find your future wife or husband. um, you're going to go through a lot of non-fits first, and then eventually when the timing connects and it's the right fit, whether it's for a job or employment, then it will work out. And you can't always predict how fast that's going to happen. So
No,
I
no, you're
know a
you're
lot.
you're you're exactly right. Finding the right fit is one of the keys in the journey, I guess I would say, that we're all on. I mean,
Mhm.
even the Chicken Soup for the Soul guys, people forget, that's one of the best selling series in the English language. Those guys were rejected over 160 times.
Yeah.
So there's a process there that they went through to try to find the right fit, and that's essentially what we're doing as editors with all these submissions that we get. We're trying to find the right place for them and for us.
Yeah, and I think that makes total sense. I mean, we've all heard stories of something gets rejected here, rejected there, then somebody else picks it up. If it happens to be the winner, then everyone else is eating crow because they're wishing that they made the bet on that one. But you can't you can't be all things to all people, so you got to pick and choose the projects that you think are going to make the most sense and have the highest probability of success. So I know a lot of people have unrealistic ideas about what they're going to achieve when they write a book, right? Like all of a sudden, the skies are going to open up and the seas are going to part, and whatever's going to happen. And you even wrote a book about that called 10 Publishing Myths. What are some of those myths, and what do you think that people get wrong about that?
There's my 10 publishing mess book, Brent. but yes, I wrote that book because um, from being in publishing so long, I understand there's so much of the publishing process is outside of my control, nothing that I can do anything about. But I wanted to tell authors that there are things that they can practically do. And so that's part of what I did in this book. There's all these myths that people have about publishing. Uh, Probably the biggest one, and that's what's in my first chapter, is that I will make a lot of money. No matter what kind of book you write, everybody figures that will happen. And I compare it to that famous Kevin Costner movie, The Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And people think that if they write it, people will buy it. Well, that's not true, because the reality is there's over 11,000 new books that come out every day in our world. So that includes all the self-publishing stuff. So there's a lot of material that's coming out all the time. And as an author, you have to control the things that you can control, and then let the rest go. I talk to authors all the time, and they say, well, my audience is over on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram. Those are great places, don't get me wrong. But in the business, we call those rented spaces, because I don't control Instagram.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I could knowingly or unknowingly violate their terms. I could get kicked off of there tomorrow. So I don't
That's
want
right.
to I don't want to build my house on sand, on something that's just going to get ripped away from me. So I always encourage authors to, build their blog and their website and their newsletter on things that they can control, and those are things that they're in charge of, and they can spread their message very easily with those kinds of actions. So that's why I wrote 10 Publishing Myths, and every chapter at the end, I have this thing called a myth buster action, an MBA. And that's a practical action that every author can take to find success and do something with their book to be able to reach people.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. So I'm assuming what you're talking about when you're saying doing things that you can control and you can own, that's what you mean by having a platform as a writer, because it's something that you have dominion over. Um, I think it's a really important distinction, and I think a lot of people go under a misconception that because they built a following, they own it, and you don't. I know people personally that have had large followings that actually have done nothing wrong and had their accounts banned. And if you are in a situation where you're relying on that for traffic, for sales, for income, it's terrifying. I mean, yes, if you could reach those people some other way, you can get some of them to move over to another platform. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't have them on an email list, if you don't have your own blog that you control, your own podcast, your own book, something like that, then somebody else, it's like you said, you're renting, and that landlord can, evict you anytime that they want. And that's the scary part.
Yeah, no, it's really true. And publishers are looking, we're actually looking for people that do have those connections and have that platform. And it's not that your platform has to be huge, but you do have to have some presence out there online, whatever that is. Even if you have a little LinkedIn account, with your photo, or Facebook or something like that, because we can build from that, but you have to have something started. So I always encourage people to, start doing something. And one of the reasons those numbers are really important to a publisher is because we've learned that it takes probably 10, 12 times that somebody has to hear about your book before they actually decide to buy it. So part of what you're doing with your social media numbers is telling people about the benefits of your book, why in the world they should be interested in it, and maybe you're spending some of those lower numbers, of exposure that people have to your book before they actually buy it. And so there's definitely a journey and a process that we're all on. For my 10 Publishing Myths book, Brett, I want people to get this book. If they go to publishingoffer.com, that's a simple thing. Publishing Offer, they can get this book from me for only $10. And that includes the shipping, along with over $200 worth of bonuses. So I try to
Listen,
make it easy for people to get this book. And then it's not a long book, but they can read the book and then actually take action and do something with all this writing that they want to do.
yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, we want to make things happen, right? So, all right, so we've looked at the pessimistic view. Let's flip it, look at the optimistic view. What are some of the benefits from writing a book?
Well, there's a lot of benefits. Not necessarily on earning money, but there are benefits in that if you write a book, you become an authority in that topic, and so it'll open up other doors of opportunity for you to speak, like at a chamber of commerce or a Kiwanis or a Rotary group. The fact that you've written a book on a topic, they go, wow, this guy must know something. Let's bring him in here and have him talk to us. So those kinds of opportunities are things that you can seize on from your book, and they can expand. Um, I believe, Brett, that we live in a world full of opportunity. There's all kinds of options out there for us. we just have to take action as authors and seize those opportunities. Otherwise, you're right. Nothing happens with it.
Yeah, ideas are great, but at the end of the day, you've got to execute on something. So, all right, so let's say somebody wants to take the plunge. They've decided, okay, yeah, I'm going all in. I want to write a book and I want to get it published. Are there specific steps or a process that you recommend that they follow to go about doing that?
Yeah, if they want to write a book, I go back to that business plan again. The book proposes that sell book that I told you about. I think that's one of the first steps I think that people need to do. But they also need to be um, thinking about their readers and their audience and their platform. Uh, I always encourage people to write for magazines because you can reach so many more people with that than with a book. But also get to a writers conference because it really is true that who you know is almost as important as what you know, and you can meet some pretty amazing people at a writers conference that will change the direction of your life actually if you have that relationship with them.
Yeah, I have to say, as a parallel in my own business as a digital marketer, so for years I've created software products, things like that, and I have a network of associates that we connect on Skype, and we promote each other's stuff. And funny story, a couple of years into it, I'd gotten to know these people pretty well, but all online. And the industry started doing these events, and there's only a couple a year, but they would host an event somewhere, and all the marketers and digital and the software creators would come and sort of hang out for the weekend, and then you go back to your life. And I wasn't going to go to any, like, I was never, because it was so busy getting stuff done. And I'm like, why would I buy a plane ticket, fly somewhere, pay for a hotel to hang out and have some drinks with people that, like, I have connections on Skype? And one of my colleagues said to me, trust me, just come to the event. The events are so different than like the online thing. So I said, okay, whatever. I'm going to do this. I'll eat a few days and I'll go. It was transformative. The minute that you go and you put a face to a name, you shake hands, you have a beer with somebody, you eat breakfast with somebody, you're hanging out, you're talking socially, the depth of the relationship that you're able to create, and the connection that you have with people, even once you go back to your office and you're back on Skype, is so different. It's such a different vibe. And ever since that first event, not only have I gone to them, but I've said to all of my colleagues that were new to the industry that never went to events, you've got to get to the events. You might, if you can't go to the one that's overseas, don't. But the one that's going to be near you somewhere in your country or whatever it is, you've got to go to it, because the value isn't sitting in the audience listening to the person pitch from the stage. The value is in the back of the room and out in the lobby where everybody's hanging out, talking, and getting to know each other. And by the way, just to put it to dollars and cents and like real world stuff, other than just the feel good getting to know each other, more business partnerships and joint ventures were struck in those environments than all the online stuff combined, which is just a power, the testament of that whole thing. And I totally agree with you. Whether you're a writer, whether you are a software producer, I don't care what business you're in. When you can get FaceTime with people, go to those things, because the amount you can learn, the amount you can grow, and just the value that you get from being there is transformative. So great advice there. Okay, so I have one last question I got to ask because it's important, and I know that everybody wants to know what you're going to say about it. So, what is your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur? I know you're a writer, but what would you advise somebody who is starting a business or running a business that they should do in order to be successful?
Yeah, I guess the Brett, the number one tip that I would give people is that a lesson that I keep learning over and over in as an editor and as a writer. We hear no a lot in our business. We get rejected a lot in this business, but I'm still on this journey to find the right fit, find the right people to work with, and I can't control that other person. At the end of the day, I keep learning that over and over. I can't make somebody sign their book contract for a Morgan James book and that we publish that book. All I can do at the end of the day is my part in the process. Uh, so as an as a human being, I want to be the best person that I can be. I want to keep growing. I want to keep learning. I want to keep meeting new people, and then seeing what kind of connection I make with those people. So I can't control that other person. I'd love to control that other person, but I can't. They have to do what they're going to do, and I have to do what I'm going to do. And it's a lesson that like I say, I keep learning over and over because I get really invested in these authors that I'm pitching, and I want them to publish with Morgan James at the end of the day. But I can't make them sign my contract and move forward with us. All I can do is my part. And so I encourage your listeners here, Brett, just to keep learning, growing, being the best person that they can, and as they have opportunity, seize those opportunities. I mean, uh, I go to conferences a lot, and I talk with writers. I listen to their ideas, and I say, that's a really good idea. Write that up and send that to me. But what I've found out there from doing this for years is that probably only 10 or 15% of the people that I meet will actually follow through, write it
Yeah.
up, and send it to me at the end of the day. Now, sure, I do my part. I email them, I call them, I encourage them to send it to me. But if you actually follow up on that opportunity, that's one of the strongest things that you can do as an author to open that door of possibility for your life and see if it does something for you.
Yeah, I love that advice. I mean, I think, first of all, enjoying the journey is super important. Like you said, lean into things, even when they don't necessarily go your way. Look at it as a learning experience, a growth experience. And at the same time, I think, it's super important to be consistent and persevere. Because if you look at just about any story of greatness, I don't know any anyway, where the path was straight and narrow from the bottom to the top, and there were no bumps along the way. Every wonderful success story that we see or that's glorified here or there, if you pull back the curtain, you see pain, you see frustration, you see failure. And it was the fact that that person never gave up. They kept pursuing their dreams because they were passionate about it, that made it, gave them that level of success. And by the way, that's honestly where the value comes from. Because for things that come so easy to us, we don't tend to value them the same way. Things that we work hard for and have to sacrifice for are those things that we always remember and the things that we always hold dear. So I think that's amazing advice. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I want to thank you again anyway for sharing all your tips and insights with us today, Terry. Visit publishingoffer.com for a special offer to get his printed book, 10 Publishing Myths, Insight Every Author Needs to Succeed, for only $10, including shipping, along with over $200 of free bonuses. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And as always, remember, no matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.